I'm going to start getting back on the Galaxy here. So this video is going to be on assembling and adjusting the Autolite 4100 carburetor that I'm rebuilding for the 66 Galaxy. And I'll just go over a couple things here first. So this part was cracked on the original carburetor. This is part for the fast idle cam. So I changed that. That's on there with the clip. And I'll adjust all this and I'll show you how you adjust it. But I guess why this is off, I don't know. Maybe we can see down in there. I doubt it. But there's a little, just take my word for it, down in that hole there's a little slit for a wire that you can hook in there just very carefully, and then you can pull a piston back on it so I can adjust the choke pull off. And then I'll adjust I'll show you how to do all the adjustments, all static adjustments, and then on the car. And I cleaned up the adjusting screws, and I painted these white because I can see them better when they're white against the blue contrast way down in there in the darkness of the motor, because you can actually get to those screws and you can't see them right now because they're not white. The new ones will be white. But I like to do the final curb idle mixture adjustment with the engine idling warm after being driven on the road with the air cleaner installed. So that way I can get my long screwdriver in here and adjust the idle, or the idle mixture I should say, for the best possible, smoothest performance of the engine. And if you do it with the air cleaner off, you put the air cleaner on, it's going to change. You do it on an engine that's just been sitting here running for 20 minutes, it's not going to be the same as if you've driven it on the road and then adjust it. So I always adjust these after I've driven on the road, the car at operating temperature for 5 or so miles with the air cleaner installed. Another thing is, this is the original base gasket to the carburetor. And if you look at this carburetor, you can see it has these openings here and here. And vacuum does, there's a little vacuum hole. Well, I don't know if I can get the light and camera, but take my word for it, there's a little vacuum hole up in there. I don't know that this side has any vacuum holes, but that one you can see the two tubes and a hole up in there. That's for the hot idle compensator, that hole. And which is this. So when the car's hot, that's a bimetal spring that will open up enough to where it'll allow extra air and make the engine start easier hot. So this gasket that I have, so you can see how it kind of goes on the bottom of the carburetor. This is the original gasket I took off when I took the engine apart. The new gasket is just kind of like so. And I don't know if that's causing too much vacuum in here or what, but I want this exact gasket. And the new carb kit does not come with that new gasket. So this is the gasket for the base between the coolant block and the intake manifold. There's a spacer. Let me take the air cleaner off and I'll show you. There's a spacer here between the carburetor and the intake manifold that coolant circulates through, so you don't get carburetor frosting in the cold weather. So that gasket I bought that you see on the bench is for between the spacer and the manifold. And I got the correct gasket on there, so I'm not worried about it. This is the gasket that I want to make sure is correct. So let me show you what I'm doing. This was the original gasket between the manifold and the spacer, that coolant spacer. That's what this gasket's supposed to replace. This gasket I was able to get, I was at a swap meet with Dave Robertson over in Novi, and the guy had these identical exact gaskets, and I got one. He did not have these Otherwise I would have got one of those too. But I can take this gasket on here and take a razor blade and cut it out and take hole punches and make exact sizes. So I'm going to make this gasket into this one. I could probably reuse this one. It's not torn, but I'm just going to make it out of this one. I did order the correct gasket, but it's on back order from the auto parts, and it could be anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months. I told them just get it for me. If it takes 2 months, so be it. You know, I can always put it on down the road. But that's kind of where I'm at with the carburetor base gasket. I'll show you what comes in the kit. Can you see what comes in the kit there? And this kit doesn't even have a secondary vacuum diaphragm. Lovely. And I guess I'll have to get one of them. So I'll have to, yeah, this carburetor may not be going on today, but I'm going to get it together and adjusted. But that's kind of where I'm at with this gasket. Another thing I picked up, you may have seen it as I was moving the camera around, is I picked up a new cap and rotor, and look at this. Made in USA. You just don't see that anymore. I got the good cap, the one with the copper terminals in it. The aluminum terminal ones, yeah, they just don't last as long as these copper terminals. Looky there. Does that show up? Yep. So I'm going to put a new cap and rotor on it, and I got the good rotor too, because those are the cap and rotor from when I bought the car. I never changed them, so I got a copper rotor too. So we're going to put a new cap and rotor on it. Seeing this is the cap and rotor from when I bought the car. I just put it back on. It looked okay, so I thought, well, I'll just reuse it. But it's got new wires, new plugs, Pertronics, new coil. I'm thinking, why don't I just put a cap and rotor on it for what they cost? So we're going to change them too. And I broke down and bought a new battery for the truck. Just throwing it on my maintainer to bring it back up to a full charge. You know, it says 820, so it's August of 20. And the battery that's in it's 10 years old. And as you remember in one of my videos where I was showing up north with the Jeep Wrangler, my brother drove it into town, into Paradise, and went to start it, and it wouldn't start. The battery was dead. Well, it turned out to be a bad battery. That battery was 12 years old. So the battery in the pickup's 10. I don't want to end up somewhere, turn the key, and have nothing happen. So as preventative maintenance, it's going to get a new battery. Okay, enough with all that. Let's get on with the Autolite 4100 reassembly and adjustment. The first thing I'm going to do is put the main jets back in. And I got the 48 sitting here for the primary side. I always start them with my fingers. And yeah, these videos are going to get long because a lot of you want to see the whole carb rebuild. Okay, all the mains are in and tight. Just to make life easier on the specifications, I highlighted them in the yellow highlighter. This is a C6AFL. That's what that is. And it gives you the bore diameters, the venturi diameters. For that's the primary, the secondary, the jet size. So this is supposed to have a 48, which is correct. A 55 in the secondary. If it was high altitude, it would have a 46 and a 53. This is not high altitude. So we're just basically going to go through, and then the TT is what the choke. Remember I told you there was letters on the choke cover? See how it has a TT there? TT. So make sure you have the correct. If you have one of these other ones, then your choke's not going to work properly. So always make sure that's correct too. These are the settings and adjustments, and we'll go over all this as we rebuild the carburetor. Got the power valve and the gasket. This is the old one and the new one, and you can kind of, that one's really stick. Look how nice and smooth that one works. Yeah, I don't think the vacuum would be able to close that one. The way these power valves work, okay, this is on your main jets here, what lets all the gas, every bit of gas that this engine burns goes through these main jets. This is the one with the accelerator pump. So it goes through the main jets, up through those tubes, and out the center of those have little holes in them, and into the carburetor. And the accelerator pump draws from over here. It doesn't draw through the mains, but everything that goes through here, idle or main circuit, goes through those main jets. So when you step on the gas and you lose manifold vacuum, this is pulled down by manifold vacuum. So when you start the car, that pulls down. When you step on it and lose manifold vacuum, that goes up. That opens this up and allows extra gas to enter into this area where this is, so that it literally doesn't starve it of fuel. Power valve's no big deal to put in. That's probably good. I don't want to over tighten it and strip the threads or anything. And then let me find the cover gasket and we'll get that installed too. Got the gasket, the cover, and I went through the screws from both carburetors and chose the best ones for this carburetor, the ones that didn't have damaged screw heads. There's zero oil on anything after running it through the parts washer. So let me get my oil squirt can, and I mean just not even a drop, I just smear some on with my finger, just so you don't bugger up the threads when you're tightening them out. That's the right amount of oil. This just helps prevent strip threads. A little bit of lubricant goes a long ways on things like this. And then you ensure you get them tight. They're not gulling up, they're actually tightening. Goes in that hole right there. Just pull it through. And then cut your excess off. The spring goes in, and you can see how the casting is such to where the spring goes in this way. If you put it in this way, your accelerator pump is not going to work. So make sure you put the spring in the correct way around. The accelerator pump goes towards out. And I already put a tad of oil on the screws. I'm going to put the old secondary diaphragm back in because the kit didn't come with a new one, and in the meantime I'll get a new one of these coming. I can always use one out of the carburetor on the car now, it's new, but that literally is like brand new. There's nothing wrong with it. Perfect shape. So it'll do for now. It hooks on that pin, and then a little clip holds it on. And there's a spring that goes in this one too. And again, see how it fits there? See how it fits there? It actually pushes onto this. I might have to get a screwdriver or something, but it will push onto that, so you can just push this right up. I removed it so I could clean this, and I didn't want to damage the spring. So let me get this thing back together. Next, I'm going to put in the primary Venturis, which means you got to put in the accelerator pump check ball. This is the new check ball, same size as the old one. Drop the old one over there, drop the new check ball in. This is the weight for the check ball. This is the little thing that allows the fuel to go up to the accelerator pump. And I need to find the gasket for this. So let me go get the gasket for this. Set this in here right now. And then this is the weight. This is that piece with that gasket. And I put a little bit of oil on the threads of that too. I like to snug these up pretty good, but don't get too carried away. You don't want to strip the threads. And again, I put a dab of oil on the threads. I may have said that, but I repeated it if I did. Alright, so the accelerator pump is together. If I put fuel in the bowl, should be able to do that, and it should squirt out those jets just by doing that right now. Gasket is installed. There's no accelerator pump on this side, so there's no putting a check ball or anything in there. Again, just a smidge of oil. Starting to look like a carburetor now, isn't it? Alright, let me move on. I think next we'll work on putting the choke on. Like I say, I'll put the floats in last. I have a decision here to make on the choke. Which one of these pistons is in better shape for the pull-off? So I measured this one, and I'll zero my caliper. It's actually zeroed right there on that piston. Then I'm going to put this piston in, measure it, and it's actually a thousandth of an inch smaller. So I'm going to use the original piston to this carburetor, not the one from that parts carburetor, as that one isn't quite as good as that one, even though this one had some scores in it, which you can still see. I just kind of buffed it up. I didn't sand any scores out or anything, so they still show up. But this is the one I'm going to definitely use. You want to get this thing screws onto there, and you want to get it oriented. If you have it 180 degrees off, it's not going to work. So you want to make sure that is oriented correctly if you take this part apart. And this is kind of the way this is where the index marks are, and that's up. And then this goes to this piece of linkage right here. So you want that not over there. You want it there. So you definitely want to have it right. And then this screw adjusts how far up your fast idle cam will move. Actually, I think it goes on this way over in there, and you notice it has marks in there, and that will be in the video later on adjusting it. We will reference that V on there. This is the little screw. Tighten it up really good. Make sure you don't strip it or break it though, but you don't want this stuff coming loose. There we go. I'm going to put the screw in this so the gasket doesn't fall out of place. Sometimes getting these linkages in, is a little bit of a difficult task. So before I tighten the screws up, I'm going to make sure that I can get this linkage in. Choke is hooked to the fast idle cam. One thing I realized I was getting ahead of myself, and one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my basic vacuum pump here, and I want to make sure that secondary diaphragm is going to pull the, run the secondaries open. And this is just kind of haphazardly holding this up against the casting, so it's not a good seal, but yeah, it's definitely holding. So there's not going to be a vacuum leak there. So that's kind of important to make sure you don't have a vacuum leak here, otherwise your secondaries won't open. Another thing too is I want to stress is don't oil any of this choke linkage or any of your throttle shafts, because all that's going to do is attract dirt and wear things out. So do not oil that kind of stuff. On marine engines, yeah, you can oil the stuff. On stationary engines, if they're not in a dusty area, yeah, you can oil the stuff. But on automobile engines, do not oil them. You will wear the components out prematurely if you do. The shop manual does show these baffles in the exploded view, so I am going to definitely reinstall them, and they're pretty simple apparatus. It just slides down right there. So I'm going to put these in next. These are the same, both primary and secondary on this carburetor. This has a little tab on it that goes over that. float shaft. And then this carburetor had a bail like this, so there's two different kinds of bails. And this snaps over that inlet seat so that your float doesn't fall out. Before I put the bails on, I just like get the floats close, and I think they're supposed to be about 17/64. And that one's pretty close. They're both pretty close. And now I'm going to put the little wire bails over. There we go. That's right on the money. I don't think it's going to get any better than that. That one's still a little deep. I'll shallow this one out. Let's see, I got to go down with it. I hope this is showing up in the video. And that's pretty much all right on the money too. So the floats are both right on the money at 17/32, where the secondaries get their vacuum through that, through there, and through there, through that. So yeah, make sure you put your gasket on the right way around too, because otherwise, you know, I would have had a vacuum leak and no secondary operation. So let me make sure that that points out, because it's got to hook into a little thing right here on the choke. Try and do it so you can see it. So I just kind of put that down and around. That is in. And then the top is in place. You got to kind of be conservative on the oil. You don't want it to get in any of the rubber components. It can cause the rubber to expand. On carburetors, I usually start from the inside screws and work outside, and I just get them all run up first, and I'll go around these a couple times, because as it smushes the gasket down, you tighten one up here and then the other one's loosened because the gasket is compressing. So I like to go around a couple times. So now we're starting to get a carburetor. I blow into the inlet to make sure that the fuel will flow. It does. Then I hold the carburetor upside down and make sure it doesn't. It doesn't. So we're all good there. And this choke linkage that you just saw me put into place. I don't know if I can do it in the video or not here, or we'll try it. There we go. Put this in next, I think. And then we'll put the linkage on. These I don't go too hog wild with, because you can warp the carburetor. Just kind of snug it up. Good. And that'll be adequate. And if you have a style of carburetor to where this actually threads into the air horn, this part up here, don't reef your wing nut down, because you'll actually warp this part of the, what happens when this threads into this thin aluminum casting, like I think Quadrajet, some of the Rochester carburetors, the air cleaner threads go right into the top here. And when you reef your air cleaner down, it pulls up on this and pulls these sides inward. And then the choke binds on the side of the air horn. So a lot of times when I get cars with cold engine performance problems, the first thing I do, if it's like a Rochester or one of the carburetors this threads into, is I look at the air horn, well, actually over in here, to see if that choke plate is binding on the air horn. If it is, and this isn't so warped out of shape that the choke doesn't close tightly, you can take the choke butterfly out and file it until it closes properly. These style here, to where they thread down into the body of the carburetor, is not an issue. You're going to bend the air cleaner before you warp the carburetor. This is a good design. Just a little tip there. How often do you get these carburetors? You go to turn these screws and they don't turn. You can't turn the adjustment screws. I've had that more times than I can count. So I never hesitate to put a little drop of oil on them before I thread them in. And don't reef these down in. You can damage the carburetor. This will push out those air bleeds into the into the carburetor and damage it. So only thread them in gently until they stop. Oops. That's closed, that's half. I'm going to open them one turn. So this goes on, I believe, this way. I think I took it off like this. There we go. And then this little clip goes through that. There we go. And we got the secondary hooked up now for the accelerator pump, and this can go in there's 2 holes here and 4 holes there, so I need to see which it's going to say inboard or outboard, and it's going to say what number hole there. It's said to put the push rod on the inside inboard hole here and then the 3rd hole here, so that's, I don't know, I can't see the screen, so I don't know what's showing up in the camera, but there's 1, 2, then 3, and 4, and it's in the 3rd one. And it's all working. That's the kick down for the transmission. So when you floor it, it downshifts the transmission, and we will adjust that too, and I will show that when I get to it. As you remember, when I took this thing apart, it was all bound up. So to make sure that piston is in the correct place in that bore, I'm going to use a paper clip, kind of bend it, and there's a slot in the bore down there that you got to catch. So I'm going to just put a little bend in the paper clip like so, and then if you notice there's a flat spot in the piston. Where'd this piston go? Alright, see how there's a flat in the piston? So you get that in that flat, and then there's a slot that this will go into, and it looks like I got that bent too far, so I think I'll rebend it, because you got to be able to get it down in here and then get it in so that you can pull this back against this, and that simulates how far this pulls out, because that's a vacuum port that only allows this piston to move so far. So it's going to go down like so far. So that's choke closed. You start the engine, it pulls on the piston, then it blows off a little of the vacuum and holds at a certain point. And that's where you want the piston located, and that's why I use this to get to that slot, and then you can adjust how much that choke plate closes. So I'm going to try and show how I do this, and this is, like I said, this is step 1 of adjusting the choke. I doubt that slot shows up in the video, but I made a tool and I took my body hammer and flattened the end of that so it catches there. It's caught in the piece, the thing, and that's as far as the piston will go with vacuum. And then you adjust the choke with a drill bit till it, until it's right, goes in and out. So let me get this stuff set up and we'll do an adjustment. The specification for this is 0.130 to 0.150, and I got 0.136. And you can adjust that a little after you get the car running. When you start it cold, if it seems a little rich, you can open it up, you can lean it out. But this is 0.136. It's a I think 9/64 or 9/32. Let me look at the drill size here. I don't remember. It's 9/64. Use my special Ford tool here. Get it in that slot. You can see that's quite a bit larger opening than what it should be. shows checking it here, so that's why I'm checking it there. Get this thing turning the right way yet. A little tight. Still just a fuzz tight. And then, like I say, you know, if when I start the car cold, that's pretty good right there. So that's how much the choke will pull off when the engine starts up. The next step is the fast idle cam. So I got to put the choke cap back on. And you got to make sure this goes in between that right there. And I always double check it to make sure by turning it both ways. See how it springs tight and then it closes. And that's the index mark. Now the shop manual says turn it 90 degrees beyond the index. So that's 90 degrees, and it says states to put this back on. And this is all adjustable on the car too if you don't want to take your carburetor off. And I can play with it as I need to once the engine's running, if, you know, after a few days, if starting it cold, if the choke's too lean or too rich, or if the fast idle doesn't step down right away. It's a quick, easy adjustment. That will, you know, give me an adjustment on how much the choke opens. So if it's loading up, I can adjust it so it opens a little more. If it's running rich, or lean, I can open it, close it a little. And then this screw adjusts the fast idle cam. And remember, I showed you an index on that fast idle cam earlier. We're going to put that screw so it's right on that index mark. And obviously it just popped off because I bumped the throttle, but we're going to push it back down. And then I'm just going to hold my finger on the throttle to keep it closed so it's there at that index. That index is right at the second step on the fast idle cam. I don't think that shows up in the video. And then I'm going to take my gauge, my Ford gauge here, and put it down through there. And it's a little tight. That should be, yeah, it might be okay. I could turn that screw in just a fuzz. You want it so this fits just the same as it did before. Doesn't take much. See, as I turn that screw in, it moves that assembly and opens the choke. So basically what you want it to do is, so when that vacuum piston opens the choke, when you push the accelerator, okay, it's going to go up to the fastest cam on the fast idle. See how it's right up? I'll take the choke off. There, the choke is off. Okay, let me get the gravity's not working here because I have the carburetor tipped over. So you let go of the choke, you hit the accelerator, it comes, closes up, and then there, you're on the fast idle cam. You start the engine and that opens slightly from that. And this can be against it. See, and I can open and close the choke while it's against the fast idle cam. See how I can do that? So anyway, the choke opens up a little bit, and then you touch the accelerator and let it off, and it hits the second cam. That's the way it's supposed to start. Starts on the fastest. The unloader or that piston opens the choke slightly. You touch the accelerator, and it's supposed to drop down to that second step. So that's the way that works. And if it doesn't drop to the second step, you can turn that screw until it does. And I believe you turn it out to get it to go further down to the lower step and turn it in to keep it up on the faster step. I believe that's the way it is. So the choke is adjusted now to loosen this back up. And the factory states that the choke cap needs to be on the index mark. So I'm going to just loosen this up so I can turn it. And there's the index is the big mark, and then there's a little mark on the choke cap right there, and that's right on the index mark. And it seems to me the Galaxy is one or two lean, whatever it is. If it's the same TT cover, I'm going to set it the same as what's on it right now, because the choke really works good on the Galaxy right now. I'm really happy with it. You push the accelerator once, turn the key, it lights up. Hit the gas, it drops to the second step, and it runs pretty good. So it runs really good when the choke's on. There we go. So that next final step is the stops on the secondaries. And what it tells you to do in the shop manual, and I'll have to get a little screwdriver, is turn the screw out until these bind close. There's a screw in there. Does it show up? Yeah. And then turn it one full turn after it contacts the arm here. So I'm going to find a little screwdriver and do that. Time to start cleaning up my mess. I'm starting to get to where I can't find my tools. Alright, let's see. This one turns. The one on the carburetor on the car did not turn, so I was not able to make this adjustment. Okay, that's binding closed as it says. It states in the manual. You can see a pretty good sized gap there. And yeah, when I close that plate, it takes a little to snap it open. So now I'm going to turn this screw until that touches that arm. And I need to turn the light on so I can see here. So if it reflects, let me put the camera up higher and then maybe you can see it better too. So it looks to me, let me back it back out. Okay, I can see light between there. I can still see it. I think it's touching right there. And then it says one turn, so that's half, one. Alright, so that should be adjusted. Well, the carburetor's finished up. I put this on, put the filter on, put the bracket on for the dash pot. And one adjustment I didn't show, which I'm not going to change, is the choke unloader. So when you put the accelerator to the floor, say you flood the engine, see how it opens the choke up a little bit? And the specifications is 1/16. Well, 1/16 is hardly anything. And when you flood an engine, you need it open more than that. So I'm just leaving that right there where it is. I think that's fine. You just want to get the choke opened up, and this hits the thing there to open the choke up. Alright, I think I'll do a separate video of putting it on the engine, and I'll adjust the fast idle speed, the curb idle speed, and the idle mixture, these two screws. And I think I'll go hunt up a fuel filter, and like I say, it's getting kind of late. It's going on 8 o'clock in the evening. I chased around to get the bumper and had to go to the bank and run some errands and stuff. So this sat for most of the day, and it's pretty late in the evening now, and so that will be it for this carburetor video on this one, and stay tuned for the next video with we'll get the car running with it. Alright, I'm going to wrap this video up. It's getting late. I'm going to go in and get it edited up so I can put it up. So if you like the video on putting the carburetor together and adjusting it, definitely hit the like button. You can see I put the it may show up. I put the new cap and rotor on. I haven't started the engine though. But if you like my channel, want to see this car all finished up, subscribe to it by hitting that 348 engine icon. And thank you for watching my videos.